So, as you drift deeper into the quietude of the night, reflect on the unflinching dance of the blade in ancient times. It was a dance of necessity, of survival, performed without the merciful veil of modern anesthesia. It was a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the sheer raw courage of both the early surgeons who dared to wield the blade and the patients who bravely faced its unforgiving edge. Their screams, though silent to us now, echo through history, a powerful reminder of the long, arduous journey humanity has taken in its quest to conquer pain. Consider the Israelites, whose ancient texts frequently link suffering, including physical pain, to God's will. The book of Job, for instance, explores the profound question of why righteous people suffer, presenting pain as a test of faith, a mysterious part of God's plan. If you were afflicted with a painful illness, you might see it as a trial, an opportunity to demonstrate your unwavering devotion. While they had practical remedies, prayer and repentance were often seen as equally, if not more, important in the quest for healing and pain relief. Your pain was a dialogue with the divine, a moment for introspection and spiritual growth. You find yourself in a world where the sun dictates your day and the moon your night, where the rustle of leaves and the distant howl of a wolf are the soundtrack to your existence. There's no Google, no Wikipedia, no urgent care clinic just around the corner. When illness or injury strikes, it's a deeply personal, often terrifying encounter. And when it comes to pain, well, that's a whole different beast. For the earliest surgeons, or perhaps more accurately, the earliest healers who dared to manipulate the human body, pain wasn't just a symptom. It was an integral part of the experience, a force to be reckoned with, and often something to be endured. In ancient Greece, while the cult of Asclepius offered practical healing, the broader philosophical and religious views on pain were complex. Pain could be seen as a consequence of fate, a necessary component of the human condition, or even a catalyst for philosophical reflection. The Stoics, for example, us to believe that one should endure pain with equanimity, seeing it as something external that could not truly harm the inner self. While this didn't offer physical relief during surgery, it provided a framework for enduring suffering, a mental anesthetic that allowed individuals to face agony with a semblance of calm. Remember that earlier mention of the Roman soldier's stoicism? It's a callback to this very idea. Pain is a test of character, not just a physical sensation. Imagine you've just stumbled, perhaps while foraging for berries or escaping a hungry predator, and your leg is twisted at an unnatural angle. The searing, blinding pain shoots through you, a sensation so overwhelming it threatens to consume your very consciousness. What do? Who do you turn to? In this ancient world, the concept of a surgeon as we know it simply doesn't exist. Instead, you might seek out the tribal elder, the shaman, the village wise woman, someone who possesses knowledge passed down through generations, a blend of empirical observation, spiritual understanding, and perhaps a touch of sheer desperation. The concept of pain as a sacrifice also emerged in some religious contexts. Enduring pain, especially during a ritual or a pilgrimage, could be seen as an act of devotion, a way to earn divine favor or atone for sins. The suffering itself became a form of prayer, a physical manifestation of spiritual commitment. This wasn't about alleviating pain, but about embracing it for a higher purpose. It's like, my leg hurts, but at least the gods are impressed with my dedication. These early healers, often working in dimly lit caves or under the vast, indifferent sky, approached pain with a mix of awe and pragmatism. They knew its power, its ability to incapacitate, to break the spirit, but they also lacked any true understanding of its physiological mechanisms. They didn't have nerve diagrams or pain receptors in their textbooks. To them, pain might have been a punishment from an angry deity, the work of malevolent spirits, or simply an unavoidable consequence of life in a harsh world. This fundamental lack of scientific understanding shaped their entire approach to surgery, making it an act of incredible bravery, both for the practitioner and, especially for you, the patient. Even the act of birth, inherently painful, was often viewed through a divine lens. In many cultures, the pain of childbirth was seen as a punishment for original sin or a necessary rite of passage. Midwives might offer herbal remedies, but prayers and invocations to goddesses of childbirth were equally important. The pain was accepted as a divinely ordained aspect of creation, to be endured with courage and faith. Consider the simplest of procedures setting a broken bone. Today, you get an x-ray, maybe some strong painkillers, and a beautifully molded cast. Back then, you're lying on the ground, perhaps on a crude mat of animal skins, your leg throbbing. The healer approaches, their face etched with concentration. They might offer you a bitter herbal concoction, something meant to calm your nerves, or perhaps, if you're lucky, a strong dose of fermented fruit juice, anything to dull the edges of the coming ordeal. But make no mistake, the pain, when they manipulate that bone back into place, will be excruciating. You'll bite down on a piece of leather, or perhaps a stick, and scream into the void. This wasn't a failure of their technique, it was simply the accepted reality. Pain was the price of potential healing. The academic debate surrounding this intersection of pain and divinity is rich and ongoing. Historians and anthropologists grapple with how much of the healing attributed to divine intervention was a genuine physiological response, a powerful placebo effect, or simply a reinterpretation of natural recovery within a religious framework. Did the belief in divine decree make the pain more bearable, or did it simply provide a narrative for its existence? One common historical fact, often overlooked, is that early humans, even before recorded history, performed trepanation, the drilling of a hole into the skull. Why the reasons are varied and still debated by historians, but one prominent theory suggests it was to relieve pressure, perhaps from head injuries, or even to release evil spirits believed to be causing headaches or mental illness. Imagine the pain of such a procedure, performed with rudimentary stone tools, without any form of anesthesia beyond perhaps a blow to the head or a strong herbal sedative. The sheer audacity of these early practitioners, and the desperate hope of their patients, speaks volumes about their understanding, or lack thereof, of physical suffering. Consider the practice of incubation in ancient temples, particularly in Greece and Egypt. If you were suffering from a painful ailment, you would sleep within the sacred precincts of a temple, hoping that the god would appear to you in a dream and reveal the cure, or even heal you directly. The pain you felt was a sign that you needed divine guidance, and the temple was the conduit for that connection. The dream itself was seen as a divine message, and the subsequent relief, whether physical or psychological, was attributed to the god's grace. A fascinating, lesser-known detail is the use of mandragora, or mandrake, in ancient times. This plant, with its forked root resembling a human figure, was steeped in folklore and believed to possess powerful narcotic properties. Ancient texts describe its use as a sedative, an analgesic, and even an anesthetic. You might have been given a draft of mandrake wine before a procedure, hoping it would render you unconscious or at least numb to the pain. The problem, of course, was the dosage. Too little and you'd still feel everything. Too much, and you might never wake up. It was a gamble, a roll of the dice in the desperate pursuit of relief. The academic debate still rages on whether its effectiveness was more psychological than physiological, given the highly variable potency and the lack of standardized preparation. Did it truly numb the senses, or did the patient simply believe it would, and thus their perception of pain was altered? In some animistic traditions, certain natural phenomena that caused pain were attributed to specific spirits. A snake bite, for instance, might not just be the result of an encounter with a venomous creature, but the wrath of a snake spirit. The healer's approach would then involve not just treating the bite wound, but also performing rituals to appease the snake spirit, hoping to alleviate the pain and prevent further harm. The physical pain was merely a symptom of a deeper spiritual discord. The very act of surgery in these ancient times was often a last resort, undertaken when all other remedies, poultices, prayers, incantations, had failed. The surgeon, if you can call them that, was often a figure of immense respect, but also fear. They held the power of life and death in their hands, and their interventions were brutal by modern standards. There was no concept of antiseptic technique, so infection was rampant. A successful surgery wasn't just about surviving the immediate procedure, it was about surviving the days and weeks that followed, battling fever, gangrene, and the body's own struggle against invasive trauma. The concept of curses was also a powerful force in explaining pain. If you suddenly developed a debilitating, painful condition, It might be believed that you had been cursed by an enemy, an envious neighbor, or an offended spirit. The healer's task would then be to identify the source of the curse and perform counter rituals to break its hold, thereby alleviating your suffering. Your pain was an invisible chain, binding you to a malevolent force. You might wonder, how did they learn? How did they know what to do? Much of it was trial and error passed down through oral traditions. They observed the effects of various plants, the outcomes of different injuries, and the responses of the human body. They learned through necessity, through the grim reality of a world without advanced medical knowledge. And in this learning, pain was their constant companion, their most brutal teacher. It taught them what worked, what didn't, and what simply had to be endured. Even in cultures with more developed medical systems, the divine aspect of pain persisted. The Romans, for instance, had a pantheon of healing gods and goddesses, and while their military surgeons were highly practical, the general populace still offered prayers and vows at temples for relief from chronic pain. Votive offerings, small statues of body parts, for example, what were left at shrines as thanks for a pain-free limb or a healed ailment, acknowledging the divine hand in their recovery. Consider the ancient Egyptians, pioneers in many fields, including medicine. Their papyri describe sophisticated surgical procedures, including the setting of fractures, the treatment of wounds, and even rudimentary forms of dentistry. Yet, even with their advanced understanding of anatomy gained, in part from mummification practices, their approach to pain management remained primitive. They used opium derived from the poppy plant as an analgesic, and perhaps even as a sedative during procedures. You might have been given a small ball of opium to chew on, its bitter taste coating your tongue, before the surgeon began their work. The dulling effect would have been welcome, but far from complete. You would still be acutely aware of the blade, the pressure, the tearing sensation. The very act of enduring pain, especially in a public or ritualistic setting, could be seen as a demonstration of piety or spiritual strength. Think of pilgrims enduring arduous journeys, or ascetics undergoing self-deprivation. The pain they experienced was not something to be avoided, but something to be embraced as a pathway to spiritual enlightenment or a deeper connection with the divine. This cultural acceptance of pain as a meaningful experience undoubtedly influenced how individuals coped with surgical agony. The concept of pain as a necessary evil was deeply ingrained. It was seen as a sign that the body was fighting, that the healing process was underway. Or, conversely, it was a sign of imbalance, of a disharmony within the body or between the body and the spiritual world. This dualistic view, pain as both a natural, albeit unpleasant, physiological response and a metaphysical manifestation, complicated their understanding and, consequently, their treatment. They weren't just treating a physical ailment, they were often attempting to appease angry gods or exorcise malevolent spirits. So, as you drift into a peaceful slumber, reflect on how deeply intertwined pain was with the divine in the ancient world. It wasn't just a physical sensation, it was a cosmic event, a message, a test, or a punishment from the gods. And in their desperate search for relief, ancient peoples turned not only to the remedies of the earth, but also to the rituals of the heavens, hoping that a prayer, a sacrifice, or a divine touch might finally bring solace to their tormented bodies and souls. Their understanding of pain was a profound reflection of their worldview, a testament to the enduring human need to find meaning in suffering. Imagine a battlefield in ancient Greece or Rome. A soldier has suffered a grievous wound, an arrow embedded in his flesh, a spear thrust into his side. The military surgeon, or iatros, would rush to his aid. Their tools would be simple knives, forceps, probes, bandages. Their immediate goal: stop the bleeding, remove the foreign object, and prevent further damage. Pain management would be secondary, if considered at all. The soldier would be expected to bear it, to show courage in the face of suffering. There was a stoic acceptance of pain, a cultural expectation that one should endure it with dignity. This cultural context further shaped the surgical experience, making the patient's fortitude as important as the surgeon's skill, as the echoes of divine decrees and spiritual interventions soften into the quiet hum of the night. Let's shift our focus from the heavens to something far more tangible, yet equally mysterious to the ancients, the human body itself. For centuries, pain was a riddle, its origins shrouded in superstition and guesswork. But slowly, painstakingly, a new understanding began to emerge, one that involved not appeasing gods, but meticulously mapping the very architecture of our flesh and bone. This is the story of how burgeoning anatomical knowledge slowly, painstakingly, began to demystify the origins of pain. Even the most basic surgical interventions, like the extraction of a tooth, were agonizing, without local anesthetics. The dentist, if such a specialized role existed, would simply clamp down with crude pliers and yank. The scream that tore from your throat would echo through the settlement, a stark reminder of the brutal realities of life without modern medicine. It's a testament to human resilience, and perhaps desperation, that such procedures were undertaken at all. Imagine you're an ancient healer, perhaps a Greek physician or an Alexandrian scholar, standing over a cadaver. This is a rare, often forbidden opportunity. The air is heavy with the scent of decay, but your mind is alight with curiosity. You're not looking for signs of divine wrath or evil spirits anymore. You're looking for answers within the intricate network of muscles, bones, and most crucially, those mysterious cords that snake throughout the body, the nerves. This is where the true understanding of pain, as a physiological phenomenon, truly begins to stir. The early surgeons, whether shamans, bone setters, or military medics, were not monsters. They were doing the best they could with the knowledge and tools available to them. Their understanding of pain was limited, shaped by superstition, empirical observation, and a profound respect for the body's mysterious workings. They saw pain as a warning, a signal, but also as an unavoidable companion to illness and injury. They sought to alleviate it where they could, using what nature provided or what their rudimentary understanding of the body allowed. But they also expected it, and expected you, the patient, to face it head-on. The history of surgery is, in many ways, the history of humanity's long, arduous struggle against pain. A struggle that began in the dark ages of medicine and continues in more nuanced forms. To this day, for a long time, the internal workings of the human body were largely a mystery, understood primarily through external observation, the examination of wounds, and perhaps the dissection of animals. The idea of opening up a human body, especially for educational purposes, was often taboo, considered sacrilegious or simply barbaric. This meant that any understanding of how pain traveled or where it originated was based on speculation rather than direct evidence. It's like trying to fix a car without ever looking under the hood. Good luck with that. As you lie there, your body screaming in protest, the ancient healer with their weathered hands and knowing eyes isn't entirely without resources. While they might not grasp the intricate dance of neurons and neurotransmitters, they possess a profound, almost intuitive understanding of the natural world. For millennia, humanity has looked to the earth, to the rustling leaves and vibrant blossoms, for solace and healing. And in this desperate quest to dull agony, nature, in its surprising generosity, offered some rudimentary, if often unreliable, gifts. One common historical fact that marked a significant turning point was the work of ancient Greek physicians, particularly Hippocrates. While he didn't fully understand the nervous system, he emphasized empirical observation and rational inquiry. He moved away from purely spiritual explanations for illness and pain, suggesting that diseases had natural causes. You might have been examined by a Hippocratic physician who carefully observed your symptoms, felt your pulse, and asked about your lifestyle, trying to deduce the physical source of your pain rather than immediately blaming angry gods. This shift towards a more systematic, observational approach laid the groundwork for anatomical investigation, even if direct dissection was still limited. Imagine the healer stooping over a small earthenware pot, stirring a murky concoction with a wooden stick. The air is thick with the scent of dried herbs, a pungent, earthy aroma that hints at both promise and peril. This isn't just random guesswork. It's the culmination of generations of observation, of trial and error, a painstaking process of identifying which plants might soothe, which might sedate, and which might, well, just make things worse. You watch, your breath catching in your throat, as they bring a small cup to your lips. The liquid is bitter, almost acrid, but you swallow it down. A desperate prayer on your lips that it will bring some measure of relief. A fascinating, lesser-known detail involves the early understanding of the brain and spinal cord. While their functions weren't fully grasped, ancient Egyptians, for instance, recognized the brain's importance. During mummification, they often extracted it, though they didn't attribute it with the central role in thought or sensation that we do today. However, later Greek and Roman physicians, through observing head injuries and spinal cord damage, began to notice connections between specific injuries to these areas and paralysis or loss of sensation. You might have witnessed a gladiator suffer a spinal injury and lose the use of his legs, leading physicians to ponder the role of the spine in transmitting signals. The academic debate here often centers on how much of this early observation was truly theoretical understanding versus simply noticing correlations without grasping the underlying mechanisms. Did they see the connection or just the coincidence? One of the most widely recognized natural pain relievers across ancient cultures was, of course, the opium poppy, from the Fertile Crescent to the Nile Valley, and later across the Silk Road. The milky latex extracted from the poppy seed pod was revered for its potent analgesic and sedative properties. You might have been given a small, hardened pellet of opium to chew, its bitter taste slowly giving way to a dull warmth spreading through your limbs. The world around you might begin to soften, the sharp edges of pain blurring into a hazy, dreamlike state. It wasn't true anesthesia as we know it, but it was a powerful narcotic, capable of inducing a profound sense of calm, even if the pain still registered somewhere in the background, a distant, muffled echo. The Alexandrian school of medicine, flourishing in the Hellenistic period around 3rd century BCE, was particularly pivotal. Here, for a brief but significant period, human dissection was permitted, albeit controversially. Herophilus and Erasistratus, two prominent anatomists, conducted systematic dissections, meticulously mapping the human body. They distinguished between arteries and veins, and crucially, identified nerves. They even differentiated between sensory and motor nerves, understanding that some nerves carried sensations like pain to the brain, while others carried commands from the brain to the muscles. Imagine the sheer revelation of tracing a nerve from a painful limb all the way back to the spinal cord, realizing that the pain wasn't just in the limb, but was being transmitted from it. This was a monumental step towards demystifying pain. But opium wasn't the only player in this botanical pharmacy. Consider the humble willow bark, a common sight along riverbanks. Long before aspirin was synthesized in a lab, ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Native American tribes recognized its pain-relieving properties. The bark contains salicin, a compound chemically similar to acetyl salicylic acid. You might have been instructed to chew on a piece of willow bark, its bitter taste a small price to pay for the subtle easing of a headache or the dull ache of inflamed joints. It wouldn't knock you out for surgery, but for chronic pain, it was a godsend. It's almost like nature had its own over-the-counter section, just without the convenient blister packs. Consider Galen, the Roman physician of Greek origin, whose influence dominated Western medicine for over 1,000 years. Although he primarily dissected animals, especially pigs and apes, due to restrictions on human dissection in Rome, he extrapolated his findings to human anatomy. He meticulously described the nervous system, understanding that the brain was the center of sensation and voluntary movement, and that nerves were crucial for transmitting these signals. If you were his patient with a painful injury, he might have carefully tested your reflexes and sensation, trying to pinpoint which nerve pathway was affected. His work, though based on animal models, provided the most comprehensive anatomical understanding of his time and heavily influenced how pain was perceived. As a disturbance in the flow of pneumovital spirit through the nerves, then there was cannabis, a plant with a history as long and winding as a forgotten river. Used in ancient China, India, and parts of the Middle East, cannabis was employed for a variety of medicinal purposes, including pain relief. You might have inhaled its smoke, perhaps from a smoldering fire, or consumed it in an edible form. The effect wouldn't be surgical anesthesia, but a profound sense of relaxation, a detachment from your physical discomfort, and perhaps a slight alteration of your perception of time. The pain might still be there, but your mind, floating on a cloud of gentle euphoria, simply wouldn't care as much. The academic debate here often centers on whether ancient societies fully understood the psychoactive versus the purely analgesic properties, or if they simply embraced the holistic effect. Were they seeking numbness, or just a really good distraction? The Roman Empire, with its vast military and gladiatorial contests, provided ample opportunities for observing injuries and their effects on the body. Military surgeons, through treating countless wounds, gained practical knowledge of anatomy, understanding which cuts led to paralysis, which to loss of sensation, and which were immediately fatal. This hands-on, albeit grim, experience contributed significantly to their understanding of the body's functional architecture, even if formal dissections were rare. You might have seen a surgeon probe a wound, carefully avoiding certain areas, knowing that damaging a particular nerve could lead to excruciating pain or permanent disability. A fascinating, lesser-known detail involves the use of alcohol. While not a plant in itself, it's a product of fermentation, often from grains or fruits. In many ancient cultures, alcohol was readily available and consumed for its intoxicating effects. Before a particularly gruesome procedure, you might have been given copious amounts of wine or beer. The goal wasn't precise pain management, but rather to induce a state of stupor, to make you less aware, less reactive. The world would spin, your vision would blur, and the pain, though still present, might feel distant, as if happening to someone else. Of course, the hangover afterward would be a whole new kind of agony, a cruel irony after surviving the initial ordeal. It's like, congratulations, you survived the surgery. Now enjoy this splitting headache and nausea. You're welcome. The concept of humors also played a significant role in early anatomical understanding, even as nerves were being identified. The idea that the body was composed of 4 basic fluids, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and that an imbalance in these humors caused illness and pain, persisted for centuries. While anatomical studies began to reveal the physical structures, the humoral theory provided a framework for explaining why those structures might malfunction and cause pain. So, while they might have known a nerve-transmitted pain, they might still attribute the reason for that nerve's pain to an excess of black bile. It's like knowing your car has an engine, but still believing it runs on magic pixie dust. Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back, way back, to a time when the very concept of pain, especially during something as terrifying as surgery, was understood in ways that would make your modern-day pain-free dental visit feel like a spa day. Imagine, for a moment, that you're living thousands of years ago and a simple broken bone, a festering wound, or a toothache that won't quit could easily be a death sentence. There are no sterile operating rooms, no fancy machines that go ping, and certainly no sweet, sweet anesthesia. You're about to experience the raw, unfiltered reality of ancient medicine, where the line between healing and sheer agony was often blurred, and frankly, you probably wouldn't have survived. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The academic debate continues on the exact extent to which early anatomists truly understood the function of the nervous system versus simply mapping its structure. While they identified nerves and their connections, the intricate electrochemical processes of nerve impulses were entirely unknown. Their understanding was largely macroscopic, focusing on what they could see with the naked eye. Did they truly grasp the concept of a pain signal? Or just observe that cutting a nerve led to numbness? Another intriguing method, often combined with herbal remedies, was the use of cold. Imagine the healer packing your injured limb with ice and snow, or perhaps submerging it in a frigid stream. The intense cold would numb the area, slowing nerve conduction and reducing inflammation. While not a deep anesthetic, it provided temporary, localized relief, allowing for brief, painful manipulations like setting a bone or cleaning a wound. This simple, yet effective, technique highlights the ingenuity born of necessity. Even in ancient China, anatomical knowledge, though often derived from executed criminals and battlefield observations rather than systematic dissection, contributed to their understanding of pain. The development of acupuncture points, for instance, suggests a detailed, albeit different, mapping of the body's energy pathways. While not based on Western anatomical dissection, it represented a sophisticated system for understanding and influencing pain through specific points on the body. You might have seen an ancient Chinese physician meticulously charting these points on a diagram, believing that by stimulating them, they could alleviate your internal suffering. The concept of counter-irritation also played a role. This involved applying something that caused a different, often less severe, pain to distract from the primary, more intense pain. Think of mustard plasters, hot compresses, or even stinging nettles applied to the skin near the affected area. The theory was that by stimulating other nerve endings, the brain would be overwhelmed and less able to process the original, more severe pain. You might have found yourself wincing from the burning sensation of a poultice, only to realize, somewhat ironically, that the throbbing in your broken arm felt marginally better. It's a bit like trying to forget you have a toothache by hitting your thumb with a hammer. Effective, perhaps, but certainly not pleasant. The slow, gradual accumulation of anatomical knowledge meant that physicians could begin to differentiate between different types of pain and their potential origins. A sharp, localized pain might be attributed to a direct injury to a muscle or bone, while a radiating, burning pain might suggest involvement of a nerve. This was a significant step away from the blanket explanation of evil spirits or divine punishment. Pain was becoming less of a mystery and more of a puzzle to be solved through careful observation and anatomical understanding. Beyond the purely botanical, some ancient practices bordered on the spiritual or even the ritualistic. In some cultures, chanting, drumming, or rhythmic movements were employed to induce a trance-like state, altering the patient's perception of pain. While not a direct analgesic, the psychological effect could be profound. You might find yourself swaying to the beat, your mind drifting away from your physical discomfort, lost in the hypnotic rhythm. The academic debate here often revolves around the placebo effect. How much of the relief was due to the actual properties of the substances or rituals, and how much was due to the patient's belief in their efficacy. The development of surgical instruments also reflected this burgeoning understanding. As surgeons gained more knowledge of the body's internal structures, they could design more specialized tools, finer scalpels for precise incisions, probes for exploring deeper wounds, and elevators for manipulating bone. While still crude by modern standards, these tools allowed for more targeted interventions, reflecting a growing confidence in their anatomical knowledge. Consider the ancient Chinese practice of acupuncture. While primarily known for its use in chronic pain management and various ailments, early forms of needling might have been used to alleviate acute pain during minor procedures. The insertion of fine needles at specific points on the body was believed to unblock the flow of qi, or life energy, thereby restoring balance and reducing pain. You might have felt a dull ache or tingling sensation as the needles were inserted, but for some it offered a noticeable reduction in discomfort, a subtle shift in your body's internal landscape. It's a complex system, and historians still debate the precise origins and initial applications of acupuncture in relation to acute surgical pain. Consider the detailed anatomical drawings that began to appear, albeit much later in the Renaissance, building upon the foundations laid by ancient anatomists. These drawings, like those by Leonardo da Vinci or Andreas Vesalius, meticulously depicted muscles, bones, organs, and nerves, providing an unprecedented visual guide to the human body. While centuries removed from the earliest attempts, they are the direct descendants of those first tentative steps to map the body's torment. They allowed for a shared visual understanding of anatomy, moving beyond oral traditions and limited observations. Another fascinating, albeit less common, approach involved the use of certain animal products. For instance, the electric catfish, found in the Nile, was reportedly used by ancient Egyptians for its electric shock. You might have been subjected to a brief, startling jolt from the fish, the sudden shock perhaps distracting from a toothache or a localized pain. While certainly not a sophisticated anesthetic, it demonstrates the lengths to which ancient healers would go to find any form of relief. It's a bit like saying, well, we don't have painkillers, but I do have this very angry eel. The shift from purely spiritual explanations to a more anatomical understanding of pain was not sudden. It was a slow, incremental process, spanning millennia. It involved brave individuals who dared to look inside the human body, to question established beliefs, and to meticulously record their observations. Their work, though limited by the tools and knowledge of their time, laid the essential groundwork for all future advancements in medicine and pain management. The understanding of how these substances worked was, of course, entirely empirical. They didn't know about endorphins or GABA receptors. They simply observed that chewing on certain leaves made people sleepy, or that drinking a particular brew made them less sensitive to pain. This knowledge was precious, guarded, and passed down through generations, often within specific families or healing lineages. It was a trade secret, honed by centuries of practical application. So, as you drift into a peaceful sleep, imagine those early anatomists, their hands stained with the grim realities of dissection, their minds alight with the thrill of discovery. They were the first cartographers of the human body, charting its intricate pathways, and in doing so, slowly, patiently, beginning to demystify the very nature of pain. Their legacy is not just in the names of bones and muscles, but in the fundamental shift in how we understand our own suffering, from a divine decree to a complex, yet ultimately decipherable, message from within. The methods were often crude, the dosages imprecise, and the outcomes unpredictable. You might receive a dose of mandrake that was too weak, leaving you fully aware of every agonizing cut. Or, tragically, a dose that was too strong, sending you into a coma from which you would never awaken. There was no standardized measurement, no precise chemical analysis. It was a delicate balance, a constant dance on the edge of efficacy and toxicity. This is where the concept of heroic medicine really comes into play. The idea that sometimes the cure was almost as dangerous as the disease. As the intricate maps of ancient anatomy begin to form in your mind, let's bring our focus back to the tangible, to the very instruments that bridged the gap between theoretical knowledge and the brutal reality of intervention. We're talking about the tools, those crude, often terrifying, implements wielded by the earliest surgeons. These weren't the gleaming, precision-engineered instruments of today. They were extensions of brave, often desperate hands, each one a testament to human ingenuity in the face of overwhelming suffering. Even the simple act of applying pressure to a nerve or artery could be used to temporarily reduce blood flow and sensation to a limb, allowing for a quicker, though still painful, incision. Imagine the healer's strong hands pressing down, cutting off the circulation, your limb growing cold and numb, before the swift, brutal cut. It was a race against time, a desperate attempt to complete the procedure before sensation returned in full force. Imagine yourself in a dimly lit space, perhaps a tent, a makeshift clinic, or even just an open field. The air is thick with anticipation, and the only sounds are the rustle of fabric, the low murmurs of assistants, and the rhythmic breathing of the surgeon. On a simple piece of cloth, or perhaps a rough wooden tray, lies a collection of objects. They are not delicate, but robust, designed for force and function. You see sharpened stones, glinting bronze, perhaps even crude iron. These are the tools of the trade, the instruments of life and death in a world without modern technology. The use of hypnosis or suggestion also likely played a role, especially in cultures where the healer held significant spiritual authority. A charismatic shaman, with their powerful presence and soothing voice, might have been able to guide you into a state of deep relaxation, convincing your mind to detach from the physical pain. This wasn't a scientific method, but a testament to the power of the human mind and the profound influence of belief. The academic debate here is whether this was a true analgesic effect or simply a heightened form of distraction and coping. For millennia, the very first surgical tools were often extensions of everyday implements. A sharp flint used for hunting or preparing food could become a scalpel for lancing a boil. A sturdy stick could serve as a splint for a broken limb. The ingenuity lay not in their sophisticated design, but in their adaptation and the sheer courage required to use them on another human being. It's like trying to build a house with only a butter knife and a spoon. You could do it, but it wouldn't be pretty. So, while modern medicine boasts its sophisticated anesthetics and pain management protocols, it's worth remembering that the journey began with nature's raw offerings. From the numbing properties of willow bark to the intoxicating effects of opium and alcohol, Ancient healers were resourceful pioneers, constantly experimenting, observing, and adapting. They laid the groundwork, however unknowingly, for the scientific breakthroughs that would eventually transform the surgical experience from an ordeal of unimaginable agony to a controlled, pain-free procedure. They were the original pharmacologists, their laboratories, the forests and fields, their test subjects. Well, you. And for that, despite the screams and the suffering, we owe them a quiet, respectful nod. One common historical fact is the widespread use of obsidian and flint blades. These volcanic glasses and hard stones could be flaked to create edges sharper than many modern steel scalpels. Though they were incredibly brittle, you might have seen a surgeon carefully selecting a piece of obsidian, testing its razor-sharp edge with a feather-light touch before making an incision. The precision they could achieve with such rudimentary materials is astonishing, a testament to their skill and the careful craftsmanship involved in their preparation. These blades were disposable, often used once and then discarded, perhaps unknowingly reducing the risk of infection compared to reusable, less sterile metal tools. As the faint aroma of herbs fades, and the echoes of willow bark and opium settle in your mind, let's drift deeper into the ancient world, to a realm where pain wasn't just a physical sensation, but a profound spiritual event. For many early cultures, the agony you felt wasn't merely a broken bone or a festering wound. It was a message, a punishment, or even a test from the unseen forces that governed their lives. And when pain intertwined with the sacred, its management became less about empirical remedies and more about appeasing spirits, performing rituals, and sometimes making sacrifices. A fascinating, lesser-known detail involves the use of specialized bone tools. Beyond simple knives, some ancient cultures developed bone needles for suturing wounds, or bone awls for drilling into skulls during trepanation. These tools, crafted from animal bones, were surprisingly durable and could be shaped to specific functions. Imagine the surgeon meticulously carving a small, pointed bone needle, its smooth surface polished from years of use, ready to stitch together torn flesh. The academic debate here often centers on the true extent of their anatomical understanding that allowed for such specialized tools. Did the tool design drive the procedure? Or did the understanding of the procedure lead to the tool design? It's a classic chicken or egg scenario for ancient surgical innovation. Imagine yourself in a small, smoky hut, the air thick with incense and the low hum of chanting. You're writhing on a mat, a fever burning through your body, your head pounding with an unbearable ache. This isn't just an illness, it's a spiritual crisis. The healer, perhaps a shaman or a priest, doesn't immediately reach for a poultice. Instead, they begin a ritual, their movements deliberate, their voice rising and falling in a hypnotic rhythm. They believe that a malevolent spirit has entered your body, causing this torment, and the only way to alleviate your suffering is to drive it out. Your pain, in this context, is a battlefield between the seen and the unseen worlds. Consider the ancient Egyptians, who, despite their lack of modern metals, developed a surprisingly diverse array of surgical instruments. Their medical papyri depict bronze scalpels, forceps, saws, and even specialized dental instruments. These tools, often beautifully crafted, show a clear understanding of the need for different instruments for different tasks. If you were undergoing a procedure in ancient Egypt, you might have seen a surgeon lay out a collection of bronze instruments, each one gleaming in the torchlight, ready for their specific purpose. Their precision in mummification also contributed to their understanding of tools needed for internal manipulation. This belief in pain as a spiritual phenomenon was widespread. In many animistic societies, every tree, every rock, every animal possessed a spirit, and disturbing these spirits could lead to illness and pain. If you stumbled and broke your leg, it might not have been just bad luck. It could have been the vengeful spirit of the ground you offended, or a warning from an ancestral ghost. The surgeon in this scenario wasn't just a bone setter. They were also a mediator, a bridge between the physical and spiritual realms. Their interventions often involved not just manipulating your limb, but also performing rites to placate the offended entities. The Roman Empire, with its advanced metallurgy, brought about significant improvements in surgical tools. Roman surgeons used iron and bronze instruments that were more durable and could be shaped with greater precision. Their kits included a wide range of scalpels, probes, hooks, bone drills, and even specialized instruments for bladder stone removal. You might have seen a Roman military surgeon, his hands calloused from years of practice, deftly wielding a finely crafted iron scalpel, its edge honed to perfection. The quality of their tools allowed for more complex procedures and a greater degree of control, even if the pain remained constant. Consider the ancient Mesopotamians, whose medical text often blended practical remedies with elaborate incantations. If you suffered from a severe headache, it might be attributed to a demon called Akkazu, or a curse from an angry god. The healer would prescribe herbs, yes, but also perform intricate rituals, reciting spells and offering sacrifices to specific deities. The pain was real, undeniably, but its cause was perceived as supernatural. Therefore, the cure had to address both the physical symptom and its spiritual root. It's like you have a headache, but the doctor tells you it's because you didn't leave enough offerings for the river god. Slightly more complicated than just popping an ibuprofen. The very act of using these tools required immense physical strength and unwavering nerve. There were no power tools, no automated systems. Every cut, every manipulation, every bone sawed was done through sheer manual effort. Imagine the surgeon, muscles straining, sweat beading on their brow, as they saw through a limb, the grating sound of bone on metal echoing in the confined space. It was a brutal, physically demanding task, requiring not just knowledge, but brute force and endurance. A common historical fact, often highlighted in anthropological studies, is the role of the shaman in tribal societies. The shaman was not merely a doctor, they were a spiritual leader, a visionary, and often the sole authority on matters of health and illness. When you were in pain, the shaman might enter a trance state, journeying to the spirit world to confront the entity causing your suffering. This journey, often accompanied by drumming, dancing, and hallucinogenic plants, was believed to be a direct intervention in your spiritual well-being, which in turn would manifest as physical healing and pain relief. The pain you felt was a manifestation of spiritual imbalance, and the shaman's role was to restore that balance. The absence of anesthesia meant that the tools had to be used swiftly and decisively. Hesitation could prolong the agony, increase blood loss, and potentially lead to a fatal outcome. Surgeons were often lauded for their speed, their ability to perform complex procedures in mere minutes. You wouldn't want a surgeon who fumbled, who paused. You wanted someone who could get in, get the job done, and get out, as quickly as humanly possible. It's like a really intense cooking show, but instead of a timer, it's your pain tolerance. A fascinating, lesser-known detail involves the concept of soul loss. In some indigenous cultures, extreme pain or illness was believed to be caused by the soul leaving the body, perhaps kidnapped by malevolent spirits, or simply wandering off due to trauma. The healer's task was then to embark on a spiritual quest to retrieve your lost soul, bringing it back to your body to alleviate your suffering. This wasn't just metaphor, it was a deeply held belief that the physical and spiritual were inextricably linked. Imagine the relief, or perhaps the confusion, when your pain subsided after the shaman returned, claiming to have wrestled your soul back from the clutches of a shadowy entity. The academic debate here often centers on the psychological impact of such beliefs. Did the belief in soul loss and its retrieval genuinely alleviate pain through a profound placebo effect? Or was there a deeper, culturally specific physiological response at play? Beyond cutting and sawing, ancient tools also included those for manipulation and reduction. Splints made from wood, reeds, or even baked clay were used to immobilize broken bones, often padded with linen or leaves. Bandages made from strips of cloth were used to apply pressure and secure dressings. You might have felt the rough texture of a wooden splint being carefully bound to your broken arm, providing a crude but essential support. These tools, though simple, were vital for post-operative care and long-term healing. The act of sacrifice, both symbolic and literal, was sometimes intertwined with pain management. In some cultures, if you were suffering from a chronic, debilitating pain, you might offer a sacrifice, an animal, a valuable possession, or even a lock of hair, to a deity or spirit in exchange for relief. The act of giving up something precious was believed to appease the higher powers, demonstrating your humility and willingness to atone for any perceived transgressions that might have caused your pain. This wasn't about numbing the pain directly, but about removing its spiritual cause. The concept of cleanliness for tools was rudimentary at best. While some cultures might have wiped their tools clean or briefly passed them through a flame, the understanding of sterilization was centuries away. This meant that every tool, no matter how sharp or well-crafted, carried the invisible threat of infection. You might survive the surgeon's blade, only to succumb days later to a fever caused by the very instruments meant to heal you. It's a cruel irony, isn't it? The very thing that saves your life could also be the thing that ends it. Consider the ancient Greeks, who, despite their advancements in rational thought, still maintained strong ties to spiritual healing. The cult of Asclepius, the god of medicine, was immensely popular. If you were afflicted with a painful ailment, you might travel to an Asclepion, a healing sanctuary, where you would undergo rituals like purification baths, fasting, and dream incubation. You would sleep in the Abaton, a sacred dormitory, hoping that Asclepius or his sacred snakes would appear to you in a dream, offering a cure or a vision of how to heal. The pain you felt was a call to the divine, and the journey to the sanctuary was an act of faith, a form of spiritual intervention to alleviate your suffering. Remember the earlier discussion about the use of cautery? The tools for this were often specialized metal rods, heated until they glowed red hot. Imagine the surgeon holding a glowing iron, its heat radiating, before pressing it onto your bleeding wound. The searing pain, the smell of burning flesh, would be an unforgettable, horrifying experience. These tools, though brutal, were often the only effective way to stop severe hemorrhage in an era before modern understanding of blood clotting or transfusions. The concept of contagious magic also played a role. This involved the belief that objects that had been in contact with a person could still influence them. If you were suffering from a painful wound, the healer might treat not only your body, but also the weapon that caused the injury, believing that by cleansing or blessing the weapon, the pain it inflicted could be lessened. It's a bit like trying to fix a broken vase by apologizing to the floor it fell on. Makes sense if you squint hard enough. The academic debate often considers the role of specialization in ancient tools. While many tools were multi-purpose, some archaeological finds suggest highly specialized instruments for specific procedures, like cataract removal or bladder stone extraction. This indicates a growing sophistication in surgical practice, driven by the need for more precise and effective interventions. Were these specialized tools evidence of a dedicated surgical profession, or simply the ingenuity of individual healers? In some ancient societies, pain was seen as a form of purification, a test of endurance, or a way to gain spiritual insight. Ritualistic scarification, tattooing, or even self-flagellation in certain contexts, while inherently painful, were not seen as negative. Instead, the pain was embraced as a pathway to spiritual growth, a means of connecting with the divine or demonstrating one's resilience. While not directly related to surgical pain, this cultural acceptance of pain as a transformative force influenced how all suffering was viewed and endured. Even the most basic tools, like probes, played a crucial role. A simple metal or bone probe could be used to explore the depth of a wound, locate foreign objects like arrowheads, or assess the extent of damage. This allowed the surgeon to gain a better understanding of the internal injury without resorting to larger, more invasive incisions. You might have felt the cold, blunt tip of a probe carefully navigating your wound, a strange sensation that was a prelude to further intervention. The line between physical and spiritual healing was often blurred, and for the ancient healer, addressing one without the other was often unthinkable. If you had a persistent, agonizing toothache, the healer might not only apply a herbal paste, but also perform an exorcism to drive out the demon believed to be gnawing at your roots. The success of the treatment was often attributed not just to the physical remedy, but to the efficacy of the spiritual intervention. The evolution of surgical tools, from sharpened stones to bronze and then iron instruments, reflects humanity's relentless pursuit of better ways to alleviate suffering and save lives. Each innovation, however small, represented a step forward in their ability to intervene effectively in the human body. These tools, crude as they may seem to us, were cutting-edge technology for their time, a testament to the ingenuity and bravery of those who dared to wield them, even in more advanced ancient civilizations, like the Romans, who had public baths and sophisticated aqueducts, superstition and spiritual beliefs about pain persisted. While Roman military surgeons were highly skilled in treating battlefield injuries, the common person might still turn to folk healers or religious rites for chronic, unexplained pain. They might visit a temple, offer prayers to specific gods associated with healing, or wear amulets believed to ward off evil spirits causing their discomfort. The pain was a constant reminder of their vulnerability to forces beyond their immediate control. So, as you drift into a peaceful slumber, imagine those ancient hands, calloused and strong, gripping their crude tools. They were not just instruments of pain, but instruments of hope, wielded by individuals who faced unimaginable challenges with unwavering courage. Their legacy is not just in the archaeological finds of ancient scalpels and saws, but in the enduring spirit of human innovation, a spirit that, even in the most primitive of times, sought to mend, to heal, and to conquer the torment of the body. The very act of surgery itself, particularly trepanation, was often imbued with spiritual significance. As mentioned before, drilling a hole in the skull wasn't just about relieving pressure, it was also about allowing evil spirits to escape, or good spirits to enter. The pain of the procedure was seen as a necessary part of this spiritual cleansing, a rite of passage that would ultimately lead to healing. The patient's screams were not just expressions of agony, but perhaps also the cries of the trapped spirits being released. As the clatter of crude tools and the imagined glint of ancient blades fade into the quietude of your mind, let's shift our focus entirely to the most crucial, yet often voiceless, participant in these ancient medical dramas. Yes, the patient. We've explored the healers, their beliefs, their potions, and their instruments. But what was it truly like to lie there, vulnerable and terrified, undergoing surgery in an age before the merciful veil of modern anesthesia? This is the story of the patient's silent scream, a visceral journey into unimaginable agony. The power of belief, or the placebo effect, was undoubtedly a significant factor in these spiritual interventions. If you truly believed that the shaman's ritual or the priest's prayer would alleviate your pain, your brain might release its own natural painkillers, like endorphins, leading to a genuine reduction in discomfort. This isn't to say the pain wasn't real, but that the mind's capacity to influence the body is profound, a phenomenon that modern medicine is only now beginning to fully understand. Imagine yourself lying on a rough surface, perhaps a straw mat or a simple wooden table. The air is probably cold, or perhaps stiflingly hot, depending on the season and location. The smells are pungent sweat, fear, the earthy scent of herbs, and perhaps the metallic tang of fresh blood. There are no comforting beeps of monitors, no hushed whispers of medical staff, no sterile white sheets. There is only the grim reality of your situation and the impending unavoidable pain. So, as you slowly drift into slumber, consider the profound difference between our modern understanding of pain as a purely physiological signal and the ancient view, where it was often a profound dialogue with the spiritual world. For them, suffering was not just a medical problem, it was a cosmic one, a reflection of their relationship with the gods, the spirits, and the very fabric of existence. And in their desperate attempts to alleviate it, they turned not only to the remedies of the earth but also to the rituals of the heavens, hoping that a prayer, a chant, or a sacrifice might finally bring peace to their tormented bodies. Your body is tense, every muscle coiled in anticipation. Your heart pounds against your ribs, a frantic drumbeat in your ears. Your breath comes in shallow, ragged gasps. You try to focus on something, anything, to distract yourself from the terror. But your mind keeps returning to the glint of the blade, the grim set of the healer's jaw, and the knowledge of what is about to happen. This isn't just fear, it's primal dread, a deep-seated instinct screaming at you to flee, to fight, to do anything but lie still. As the whispers of ancient spirits and the echoes of sacred chants fade into the background, we now confront the stark, brutal reality of what actually happened when the spiritual remedies failed, or when the injury was simply too severe to be addressed by herbs and prayers alone. We're talking about the moment the healer, or the proto-surgeon, picked up their tools. This is where the rubber meets the road, or rather where the blade meets the flesh, in an era where courage was not just a virtue, but the only anesthetic you had. One common historical fact: almost universally true across ancient surgical accounts, is the need for physical restraint. There was no gentle persuasion. There was brute force. You would be held down, firmly, by several strong individuals, assistants, family members, or even fellow soldiers. Their hands would grip your limbs, their weight pressing you against the surface, ensuring you couldn't flail or escape when the agony began. You would struggle, instinctively, but their hold would be unyielding. The feeling of being completely overpowered, of having your autonomy stripped away just when you needed it most, would be a profound additional layer of trauma. It's like being tied down for a particularly unpleasant dental procedure, except instead of a drill, it's a glowing hot iron. Good times. Imagine you're there, perhaps in a dimly lit tent on a battlefield, or in a rough-hewn dwelling deep in a village. Your arm, mangled and bleeding, is the focus of intense, grim attention. The healer approaches, their face a mask of concentration, their hands steady despite the gravity of the task. There's no gentle bedside manner, no soothing words about a little pinch. There's just the cold, hard glint of metal, or perhaps the sharpened edge of obsidian, reflecting the flickering firelight. This is the moment of truth, where the body's resilience is tested to its absolute limit. A fascinating, lesser-known detail is the psychological impact of the sound of ancient surgery. Imagine the grating sound of a bone saw cutting through flesh and bone, the sickening squelch of tissue being severed, the sizzle of cautery, or the dull thud of a bone being reset. These weren't subtle noises, they were visceral, horrifying sounds that would echo in your ears, amplifying the pain and terror. You might close your eyes, but you couldn't escape the auditory assault. The academic debate here often explores the role of auditory processing in pain perception. Did these sounds actually increase the perceived intensity of the pain, or simply contribute to the overall psychological trauma? The tools themselves were often shockingly primitive by modern standards, yet remarkably effective for their time. Think of sharpened flint knives, bronze scalpels, bone saws, and crude forceps. These weren't precision instruments, they were designed for brute force, for cutting, prying, and severing. You might see the surgeon test the edge of their blade with a calloused thumb, a silent acknowledgement of the pain it was about to inflict. There's no sterilization, of course. The blade might have been wiped on a piece of cloth, or perhaps heated briefly in the fire, more for perceived purity than for any actual germ-killing properties. Remember that ancient Egyptian crocodile dung sunscreen? Yeah, hygiene wasn't exactly their strong suit. As the surgeon begins, the initial cut would be a searing, blinding agony. Your body would convulse, a scream tearing from your throat, muffled perhaps by a gag or a piece of leather you were given to bite down on. Every nerve ending would fire, sending shockwaves of pain through your entire being. You would feel the tearing, the pressure, the coldness of the blade, the warmth of your own blood. There is no escape, no turning away. You are fully, utterly present for every excruciating moment. One common historical fact, evident across many ancient civilizations, is the practice of amputation. When a limb was severely crushed, gangrenous, or hopelessly infected, the only way to save the patient's life was to remove the limb entirely. Imagine the scene you're held down by several strong individuals, your teeth clenched, your eyes wide with terror. The surgeon, with a grim determination, takes a deep breath. There's no time for hesitation. With a swift, powerful motion, they begin to cut through flesh, muscle, and bone. The sound, the sensation, the sheer agony of it would be beyond anything you could ever conceive. It was a race against time, a desperate act to sever the dying part before the rot consumed the whole. Consider the patient's experience during a trepanation. You're conscious, perhaps given some opium, but still acutely aware. You feel the pressure of the drill, the grinding sensation as it bores through your skull. The sound would be amplified, reverberating inside your head. You might feel a sudden release of pressure, followed by a strange, dizzying sensation. The fear of brain damage, of death, would be ever present, even as the physical pain consumed you. It's a testament to the desperation of ancient patients that they would willingly undergo such a terrifying procedure. A fascinating, lesser-known detail involves the use of cautery. Before the advent of effective ligatures, stopping severe bleeding was a monumental challenge. Ancient surgeons often resorted to heating metal instruments, perhaps a branding iron or a specialized cautery tool, until they glowed red hot. This searing instrument would then be pressed directly onto the severed blood vessels, burning the tissue and sealing them shut. The smell of burning flesh, the hiss and sizzle would fill the air, adding another layer of horror to the already unbearable pain. It was effective in preventing blood loss, but the pain it caused was unimaginable, a brutal trade-off for survival. The academic debate here often centers on whether the immediate shock of the cautery was a crude form of anesthesia by overwhelming stimulus, or simply another layer of torment that patients had to endure. The concept of shock was not understood in ancient times. The massive trauma, blood loss, and overwhelming pain would often send the patient into a state of physiological shock. Your body would go cold, your pulse would become weak and thready, and your breathing shallow. You might lose consciousness, a merciful blackout, but it was often a sign that your body was shutting down, teetering on the brink of death. The surgeon would continue their work, unaware that the patient was slipping away, not just from pain, but from the systemic collapse of their body. The very speed of the ancient surgeon was a testament to their skill and the necessity of their situation. There was no luxury of time. The quicker the procedure, the less the patient suffered, and the less blood was lost. Surgeons were often judged by their swiftness, their ability to make precise, decisive cuts under immense pressure. You wouldn't want a surgeon who lingered, who hesitated. You wanted someone who could get the job done brutally, but quickly. It's like a really bad speed run. But with your life on the line, remember the potions of oblivion we discussed while they offered some sedation? They were rarely strong enough to induce true surgical anesthesia. So even if you were given a potent brew of mandrake or opium, you would still be aware, albeit in a hazy, dreamlike state, of the pain. It might feel distant, muffled, like a bad dream you couldn't quite escape. But it would still be there, a persistent, gnawing presence, a reminder of the brutal reality. It's like trying to sleep through a rock concert. You might drift off, but the bass is still thumping in your chest. Consider the treatment of arrow wound. If an arrow was deeply embedded, simply pulling it out could cause more damage. Ancient texts describe methods where the arrow shaft would be pushed through the body until the arrowhead emerged on the other side, where it could then be removed. Or in some cases, the surgeon might have to cut around the arrowhead to extract it. The pain of such a procedure, with the foreign object still lodged within your body, would be constant, sharp, and unrelenting. Every movement, every breath, would send fresh waves of agony through you. The aftermath of surgery was often as agonizing as the procedure itself. The wound would throb, burn, and ache. Without proper pain management, you would lie there, enduring constant discomfort. The risk of infection was enormous. Days later, a fever might set in. Your wound would become inflamed and pus-filled, and the pain would escalate to a new, unbearable level. The smell of gangrene, the feeling of your body slowly decaying, would be a horrifying reality. Your silent scream would continue day after day as your body fought a losing battle against invisible enemies. Even seemingly minor procedures, like setting a dislocated joint, were performed with a complete disregard for your comfort. Imagine your shoulder popped out of its socket, hanging uselessly. The healer would grab your arm, perhaps bracing their foot against your chest, and with a sudden, powerful yank, attempt to snap the joint back into place. The pop, the grinding sensation, and the sudden, intense burst of pain would be followed by a wave of relief. But the journey to that relief was a moment of pure, unadulterated torment. The patient's recovery was a long, arduous journey, fraught with peril. There were no antibiotics, no sterile dressings, no sophisticated wound care. You would rely on simple poultices, bandages, and the body's own natural healing abilities. Every movement would send fresh waves of pain. Sleep would be fitful, haunted by the memory of the blade and the constant throbbing. The psychological scars would be as deep as the physical ones, a permanent reminder of the ordeal you endured. The psychological aspect of this was profound. You knew what was coming. You had heard the screams of others, or perhaps seen the grim faces of those who had endured such procedures. The fear itself would be a form of pain, a tightening in your gut, a racing heart. And when the surgeon began their work, there was no escape. You were utterly at their mercy, your body a canvas for their brutal, life-saving art. The academic debate often considers the role of cultural stoicism in enduring pain. In societies where bravery and endurance were highly valued, patients might have felt immense pressure to bear their suffering silently, to not cry out or show weakness. This societal expectation could have influenced their outward display of pain, even if their internal agony was immense. Did they truly feel less pain, or were they simply better at suppressing its outward manifestation? The concept of cleanliness was rudimentary at best. While some cultures had ideas about washing hands or instruments, the understanding of microscopic pathogens was centuries away. This meant that every incision, every manipulation, carried an enormous risk of infection. You might survive the surgery itself, only to succumb days later to a raging fever, pus-filled wounds, and the slow, agonizing spread of gangrene. The pain of infection, the throbbing, burning sensation, would be a secondary torment, often more prolonged and ultimately fatal than the initial injury. It's a cruel twist of fate, surviving the blade only to be undone by invisible enemies. Consider the ancient Roman soldier wounded on the battlefield. He would be brought to the valetudinarium, the military hospital. While Roman surgeons were skilled, the soldier was expected to be stoic. He would bite down on a leather strap, perhaps, and endure the removal of an arrow or the setting of a bone. His comrades would watch, their faces grim, knowing that one day it might be them. The pain was a part of the warrior's life, a badge of honor to be borne with silent fortitude. Remember the discussions about spiritual healing. Sometimes, even when a physical intervention was necessary, the spiritual rituals would continue alongside it. The chanting might still hum in the background as the blade cut, a desperate attempt to ward off evil influences from the open wound. The two worlds, the physical and the spiritual, were not separate in their minds. They were intertwined, each influencing the other. The patient's journey through ancient surgery was one of profound vulnerability. You were entirely dependent on the skill, knowledge, and courage of your healer. There was no second opinion, no patient rights, no malpractice suits. Your life was literally in their hands, and you had no choice but to trust them, even as they inflicted unimaginable pain. It's a humbling thought, isn't it? To be so utterly at the mercy of another, with no recourse but to endure. In ancient Rome, military surgeons, known as medici, were highly skilled. Learning their craft on the brutal proving ground of the battlefield, they were adept at treating wounds, setting bones, and performing amputations. Their tools were more sophisticated than those of earlier eras, including specialized hooks, drills, and spatulas. Yet, even with their advanced techniques, the fundamental reality of pain remained. The Roman soldier, known for his discipline and stoicism, was expected to endure. There was no crying out, no weakness. The pain was simply a part of the warrior's burden, to be borne with silent fortitude, even for minor procedures like a tooth extraction. The experience was brutal. Imagine the crude pliers, the strong hands, the sudden wrenching pull. The pain would be instantaneous, sharp, and overwhelming, followed by a throbbing ache that would linger for days. You would be left with a gaping hole in your mouth, and the memory of the agony? It's enough to make you appreciate your modern dentist, even with the drills. The use of ligatures, or tying off blood vessels to prevent bleeding, was known in some ancient cultures, but it wasn't widespread or consistently applied. The Greek physician Hippocrates, often called the father of medicine, described various surgical techniques, including the use of bandages and splints. He also understood the importance of cleanliness. Though without the germ theory, his methods were limited. His writings hint at a more empirical approach to pain, focusing on observation and natural remedies, but still within the confines of a world without true anesthesia. The academic debate here often questions how much of Hippocrates' cleanliness was based on true understanding versus simply good practice that coincidentally reduced infection. The patient's silent scream wasn't always silent. Of course, there would be screams, cries, moans, and desperate pleas. But in the grand sweep of history, their individual voices are often lost, overshadowed by the narratives of the healers and the advancements of medicine. Yet, it is their suffering, their incredible endurance, that truly defines the surgical experience of the ancient world. Their pain was the crucible in which medical knowledge was forged, a harsh teacher that drove humanity's relentless pursuit of better ways to alleviate suffering. Imagine the patient's perspective during such an ordeal. You might have been given a piece of leather to bite down on, or perhaps a strong, bitter herb to chew. Your body would be racked with spasms, your muscles tensing against the pain. You might pass out from the sheer intensity of it, a temporary reprieve that was often welcomed. But then you would awaken, groggy and disoriented, to the throbbing reality of your newly altered body. The memory of the blade, the tearing, the burning, would be seared into your mind. So, as you drift into a deep, peaceful sleep, take a moment to appreciate the comfort and safety of modern medicine. And remember the countless individuals who came before us, who faced the blade with nothing but their raw courage and the faint hope of survival. Their silent screams echo through time, a powerful reminder of the long, arduous journey humanity has taken to conquer pain, and a testament to the incredible resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable torment. The bravery of these ancient patients is truly remarkable. They faced procedures that would send shivers down the spine of any modern person, knowing full well the agony they would endure, and the high probability of death, either from the surgery itself or from subsequent infection. Their willingness to undergo such torment speaks volumes about the desperation of their circumstances and their profound desire to survive. As the echoes of the patient's silent scream fade into the deep quiet of your consciousness, let's finally turn our gaze towards the horizon, towards the first faint glimmers of hope in humanity's long, arduous struggle against pain. For millennia, agony was an unavoidable companion to illness and injury, a brutal reality of surgical intervention. But slowly, painstakingly, the seeds of a new understanding were sown, driven by relentless curiosity and the unwavering desire to alleviate suffering. This is the story of those initial flickers, the nascent scientific curiosity that would eventually, centuries later, revolutionize pain management. As the phantom pain of ancient blades and the acrid smell of cautery slowly dissipate from your mind, let's ease into a different kind of ancient solace, one that promised not just relief, but perhaps a temporary escape from the very consciousness of suffering. We're now venturing into the shadowy world of early chemical sedation, where humanity, desperate for a respite from agony, began to experiment with nature's most potent and often perilous worst concoctions. This is where the quest for oblivion truly began, a journey paved with fermented brews and potent plant extracts. Imagine yourself in a quiet study, perhaps in a medieval monastery or an early university, surrounded by dusty manuscripts and the faint scent of parchment. You're not a shaman or a battlefield surgeon, but a scholar, a thinker, someone who believes that the body's mysteries can be unraveled not just through prayer or brute force, but through systematic observation and reasoned inquiry. The pain you witness, the suffering you see, isn't just a given. It's a problem to be solved, a puzzle to be meticulously pieced together. Imagine the scene you've survived the initial trauma, but the lingering pain is a relentless torment, gnawing at your resolve. The healer, having exhausted their more direct, brutal methods, now turns to their collection of dried leaves, strange roots, and bubbling liquids. This isn't the precise science of modern pharmacology. It's an art, a gamble, a whispered secret passed down through generations. You watch with a mix of hope and trepidation as they prepare a draft, its aroma hinting at both earthy bitterness and something subtly sweet, yet undeniably dangerous. For much of ancient and medieval history, medical progress was slow, often hampered by religious dogma, limited anatomical knowledge, and the sheer difficulty of experimentation. Yet, even in these challenging times, certain individuals, driven by an innate scientific curiosity, began to challenge prevailing notions and seek more effective ways to manage pain. They weren't looking for miracles, but for understanding, for patterns, for the underlying mechanisms that caused such profound suffering. It's like trying to figure out how a clock works when all you have is a hammer and a vague idea of time. Eventually, yeah, you might get there, but it's going to be a long process. The earliest and most widely accessible chemical sedatives were, without a doubt, fermented beverages, From ancient Egypt's beer to Mesopotamia's wine and the various meads and ciders of prehistoric Europe, alcohol was a universal constant. You might have been given a large goblet of strong, unwatered wine, its potent fumes stinging your nostrils even before the first sip. The goal wasn't just to make you tipsy, it was to render you insensible, to dull your senses to the point where the pain, while still present, became a distant, muffled echo. A problem for a slightly less intoxicated version of yourself. The world would swim, your thoughts would blur, and for a brief, blessed period, the sharp edges of your suffering would soften. Of course, the sheer volume required to achieve such a state often led to violent retching and a truly spectacular hangover. A cruel reminder that even oblivion comes with a price. It's like trying to forget your problems by chugging a gallon of cough syrup. It might work for a bit, but the aftermath is its own special kind of hell. One common historical fact that represents a significant flicker of change is the reemergence of systematic anatomical study during the Renaissance. Building upon the foundations laid by ancient Greeks like Galen, figures like Andreas Vesalius, with his groundbreaking work De Humani Corporis Fabrica, on the fabric of the human body, meticulously dissected human cadavers and produced incredibly accurate anatomical illustrations. You might imagine Vesalius, scalpel in hand, carefully tracing a nerve, understanding its pathway, and beginning to connect specific nerve pathways to sensations like pain. This detailed mapping of the body's internal structures was crucial, as it provided a physical framework for understanding how pain signals traveled and where they originated. It was no longer just a vague sensation. It was a signal transmitted along a specific, identifiable pathway. One common historical fact is the widespread use of opium, derived from the poppy. We touched on it briefly, but its role as a primary sedative and painkiller cannot be overstated. From the Sumerians to the Greeks and Romans, opium was the closest thing they had to a miracle drug. You might have been given a small, sticky ball of raw opium to chew, or a liquid extract to drink. The initial bitterness would quickly give way to a profound sense of warmth and detachment. Your limbs would feel heavy, your eyelids droop, and the world would recede into a hazy, dreamlike state. Surgical procedures, though still agonizing, would be endured with a greater degree of passivity. Your body present, but your mind somewhere far away, perhaps wandering through fields of poppies. A fascinating, lesser-known detail involves the early, almost accidental discoveries related to nerve compression and pain relief. While not fully understood, ancient practitioners sometimes observed that applying pressure to certain points on the body could temporarily alleviate pain in a distant limb. This was often attributed to mystical forces or energy flow, but in retrospect, it was a crude form of nerve compression. Imagine a healer pressing firmly on a nerve in your upper arm, and for a brief moment, the throbbing pain in your hand lessens. This empirical observation, though lacking scientific explanation, hinted at the nervous system's role in pain transmission and the potential for physical manipulation to interrupt it. The academic debate here often centers on how much of this was truly a physiological effect versus a powerful placebo effect. Given the limited understanding of neurology at the time, did they stumble upon a genuine mechanism, or just a very convincing trick? A fascinating, lesser-known detail involves the use of soporific sponges. These were sponges soaked in a mixture of various narcotic substances, such as opium, mandrake, hemlock, and even cannabis. The sponge would then be placed over your nose and mouth, allowing you to inhale the vapors. The idea was to induce a state of unconsciousness, or at least deep sedation, before a painful procedure. Imagine the heavy, sweet, cloying scent filling your lungs, your vision blurring, and the world slowly fading to black. The problem is, of course, that was the imprecise dosage and the volatile nature of the compounds. Too little, and you'd still scream. Too much, and you might never wake up. It was a dangerous game of chance, with life and death hanging in the balance. The academic debate here often revolves around the true efficacy of these sponges. Were they genuinely capable of inducing surgical anesthesia, or were they more likely to cause profound narcosis, leaving patients still responsive to painful stimuli, albeit in a deeply altered state? The slow, incremental development of distillation techniques also played a crucial role. While alcohol had been used for millennia, the ability to produce stronger, purer spirits through distillation, perfected in the medieval Islamic world and later in Europe, meant that more potent sedatives could be created. Imagine the alchemist, tending to their alembic, collecting the clear, potent liquid that was far more intoxicating than any wine or beer. This increased potency, while still dangerous, offered a greater chance of inducing deeper states of stupor or unconsciousness, moving closer to true sedation for surgical purposes. It's like upgrading from a weak coffee to a triple espresso, same concept. Much stronger effect? Beyond opium and alcohol, ancient healers experimented with a vast array of other plants. Mandrake, with its folklore and potent alkaloids, was a frequent choice. You might have been given a strong brew made from its root, its bitter taste a prelude to the heavy drowsiness that would soon descend upon you. Hemlock, famously used to execute Socrates, was also known for its paralytic and sedative effects, though its toxicity made it incredibly dangerous. Belladonna, or deadly nightshade, with its hallucinogenic and anticholinergic properties, could induce a dreamlike state and reduce secretions. But again, the line between therapeutic dose and fatal poisoning was razor thin. It's like playing Russian roulette with a plant. Consider the work of medieval Islamic scholars, who were instrumental in preserving and advancing medical knowledge from the Greeks and Romans, adding their own observations and innovations. Physicians like Avicenna ibn Sina, in his monumental The Canon of Medicine, synthesized vast amounts of medical knowledge, including detailed descriptions of various herbal remedies and their effects on pain and consciousness. While still relying heavily on traditional methods, their emphasis on empirical observation and systematic recording laid important groundwork for future discoveries. You might have read Avicenna's texts, noting his careful categorization of plants and their properties, a far cry from the purely spiritual explanations of earlier eras. The process of preparing these sedatives was often ritualistic and secretive. The healer might gather the plants under specific moon phases, grind them with ancient mortars and pestles, and steep them in water or alcohol for days. There was no chemical analysis, no understanding of active compounds. It was all based on empirical observation and generations of accumulated wisdom, often mixed with superstition. The potency of the brew could vary wildly depending on the plant's growing conditions, the time of harvest, and the exact preparation method. You were essentially trusting your life to a medieval mixologist with a very limited understanding of chemistry. The development of more sophisticated surgical instruments, though still crude by modern standards, also reflected a growing understanding of the body. As surgeons gained more anatomical knowledge, they could design tools that were more precise, allowing for less traumatic incisions and more targeted interventions. This reduced the immediate pain and trauma, even if it didn't eliminate it entirely. Remember those Roman surgical kits with their specialized scalpels and probes? Those were early steps towards minimizing the brute force and maximizing precision, a subtle but significant shift in the surgical approach. Consider the ancient Chinese, who, in addition to acupuncture, utilized various herbal preparations for the pain relief and sedation. Hua Tuo, a renowned physician during the late Eastern Han Dynasty, is credited with developing mafisan, a concoction believed to be an anesthetic. While its exact composition is debated by historians, it likely contained a mixture of cannabis, datura, and other herbs. If you were undergoing a complex surgery, perhaps to remove a tumor or repair a hernia, you might have been given mafesin to drink, hoping it would render you unconscious and insensible to pain. The descriptions of patients undergoing surgery without feeling pain suggest a profound level of sedation, perhaps even true anesthesia, for its time. The academic debate often questions the true extent of scientific method in these early periods. While individuals were making observations and drawing conclusions, the rigorous, controlled experimentation that defines modern science was still centuries away. Was it true scientific inquiry or simply highly intelligent trial and error? The line is often blurry, but the intent to understand and improve was undeniably present. The psychological impact of these potions cannot be underestimated. Even if the chemical effect wasn't perfect, the belief that you were receiving something powerful, something that would dull the pain, could have a profound placebo effect. Your mind, desperate for relief, might begin to release its own natural painkillers, augmenting the effects of the ingested substances. You might feel a sense of calm, a detachment, simply because you expect it to. It's a bit like when you're really nervous about a shot, and the nurse tells you it's just a little prick, and somehow it feels less bad. The power of suggestion is a potent, if invisible, ingredient. Even the simple act of keeping detailed records, however imperfect, contributed to this slow awakening. When physicians began to write down their observations, their remedies, and the outcomes of their interventions, a cumulative body of knowledge could begin to form. This allowed future generations to build upon past successes and learn from failures, rather than starting from scratch each time. You might have seen a monk meticulously transcribing medical texts, preserving knowledge that would eventually contribute to a more scientific understanding of pain. The use of inhaled sedatives was also explored, though less commonly than ingested ones. Beyond the soporific sponges, some cultures might have burned certain herbs or resins, allowing the patient to inhale the smoke. The fumes from cannabis, for instance, could induce a state of relaxation and pain reduction. The challenge, of course, was controlling the dosage and ensuring a consistent effect. It was often a hit-or-miss affair, with outcomes varying wildly. The quest for a truly painless surgical experience was a long and winding road, filled with dead ends and dangerous experiments. But each small discovery, each new observation, each refinement of a tool or a potion, was a flicker of hope. It was the slow, dawning realization that pain was not an insurmountable force, but a complex biological phenomenon that could eventually be controlled. The very concept of chemical sedation in ancient times was intertwined with the idea of altering consciousness. They weren't just trying to block pain signals. They were trying to transport the patient to a different state of being, a realm where physical suffering held less sway. This often blurred the lines between medicine, spirituality, and even recreational drug use. The same plants used to dull pain might also be used in religious ceremonies or for personal introspection. Consider the early, almost desperate, attempts to use cold for local anesthesia. While crude, the observation that extreme cold could numb a limb was a key insight. Freezing mixtures, though difficult to create and control, were sometimes applied to specific areas before minor procedures. You might have felt an intense, biting cold on your skin, followed by a strange numbness, a temporary reprieve before the inevitable pain of the incision. This direct physical intervention, rather than an ingested potion, pointed towards a different avenue for pain control. Even the most basic forms of physical sedation were sometimes employed. A sharp blow to the head, for instance, could induce unconsciousness. While incredibly dangerous and imprecise in desperate circumstances, it might have been used as a last resort before a swift, brutal procedure. Imagine the healer raising a heavy club, your eyes wide with terror before the world goes black. You wouldn't remember the surgery, but you might wake up with a concussion and a new set of problems. This is where the term knockout truly originated. Though without any of the modern medical safeguards, the gradual shift in philosophical thought also played a role. As the Enlightenment approached, there was a growing emphasis on human reason and the ability to control and improve the natural world. This intellectual climate fostered a greater willingness to experiment, to question traditional beliefs, and to seek scientific solutions to human suffering. Pain was increasingly seen as a problem to be solved by human ingenuity, rather than simply endured as a divine decree. It's like the world finally decided, you know what, maybe we don't have to suffer so much. Let's try to fix this. The academic debate about the effectiveness of these ancient sedatives is ongoing. While historical texts describe profound effects, modern scientists often question whether they truly achieved surgical anesthesia as we understand it, or merely induced deep narcosis, amnesia, or a powerful placebo response. The lack of precise measurements and standardized preparations makes it difficult to replicate or verify their exact effects. However, there's no doubt that these were genuine attempts to alleviate suffering. Born from a deep-seated human need to escape the clutches of pain, the very existence of hospitals and infirmaries, however basic, provided a concentrated environment for observation and learning. While they were often places of suffering, they also allowed healers to see a greater variety of ailments and injuries, to compare outcomes, and to refine their techniques. This communal learning environment, however informal, contributed to the slow accumulation of knowledge about pain and its management. So, as you settle deeper into your pillow, let your mind wander to those ancient healers, meticulously preparing their potions of oblivion. They were the alchemists of anesthesia, experimenting with nature's most powerful gifts, risking both their lives and yours in the desperate pursuit of relief. Their methods were crude, their understanding limited, but their intention was clear to offer a brief, merciful escape from the unbearable reality of pain. And in that quest, they laid the very first tentative steps on the long road to modern anesthesia, a journey that would eventually transform surgery from an ordeal of unimaginable agony into a peaceful, pain-free slumber. The story of pain management is, in essence, the story of humanity's relentless pursuit of comfort and control over its own body. From the earliest shamans to the medieval scholars, each generation added a small piece to the grand puzzle. They were driven by empathy, by curiosity, and by the sheer, undeniable reality of suffering. Their efforts, however humble, were the first steps on a path that would eventually lead to the wonders of modern anesthesia, allowing surgeons to perform miracles without inflicting unimaginable agony. As the lingering scent of ancient sedatives fades from your memory, and the blurred edges of consciousness sharpen once more, let's turn our gaze from the physical remedies and the brutal realities of the blade to something far more profound, something that shaped the very understanding of pain for millennia the divine. In many ancient societies, your suffering wasn't just a physiological response, it was a message from the heavens, a decree from the gods, or a consequence of your spiritual standing. And when pain was seen as divinely ordained, its management became a complex dance between earthly intervention and celestial appeasement. So, as you drift into a deep, peaceful sleep, let your mind rest on these early flickers of a painless dawn. Remember the brave thinkers and experimenters who, in an age of darkness, dared to seek light. Their quiet inquiries, their meticulous observations, and their unwavering belief in the power of human understanding laid the foundation for a world where pain, during surgery, became a choice, not a sentence. Their legacy is the silent, comfortable slumber you now enjoy, a testament to the long, remarkable journey of human progress. And now, as our story comes to a close, you may feel a sense of relief creeping through your veins. Let the images of primitive knives, ancient anesthetics, and the silent screams of patience fade into the night. No more excruciating pain, no more extreme fear, just a peaceful, quiet embrace that wraps you like a warm blanket. Imagine you are living in a world where the gods are not distant, abstract concepts, but active participants in your daily life. They control the harvest, the weather, the outcome of battles, and, crucially, your health. When a sudden, excruciating pain grips your body, your first thought might not be about a physical ailment, but about an offended deity, a broken taboo, or a sin committed. The throbbing in your head, the searing ache in your gut, these are not random occurrences, they are divine communications, warnings, or even punishments. Take a deep breath. Feel the softness of the pillow beneath your head, the softness of the blanket. That ancient world, with its unimaginable challenges and pain, is far away. You are here in the safety and comfort of modern times, where medical knowledge and technology have advanced by leaps and bounds. Let your mind drift, no longer troubled by painful images, but instead filled with deep gratitude for the brave pioneers who laid the foundations for today's medicine. The healer in this context is not just a medical practitioner, but often a priest, a prophet, or someone deeply attuned to the spiritual realm. Their role is to interpret the divine message embedded in your pain. They might consult omens, interpret dreams, or perform divinations to ascertain which god you have angered, or which spiritual transgression has led to your suffering. Your pain, therefore, becomes a diagnostic tool, a window into your spiritual ledger. Your eyes slowly close, eyelids heavy. The sounds around you become distant and blurry. A feeling of drowsiness spreads throughout your body, pulling you into a deep and peaceful sleep. Relax completely. Let all your worries disappear. You have been on a long journey, through time, to discover the wonders and harshness of history. Now is the time to rest, to purify your soul and restore your body. Let your sweet dreams take you far away, to a world without pain, only absolute peace. One common historical fact, pervasive across numerous ancient cultures, is the belief in divine punishment for sin. In ancient Mesopotamia, illness and pain were often seen as the direct result of displeasing the gods or violating moral codes. If you suffered from a chronic, debilitating pain, it might be interpreted as a sign of divine wrath, a consequence of some unknown transgression. The treatment, therefore, involved not just physical remedies, but also elaborate rituals of confession, purification, and supplication to appease the offended deities. You might spend days in a temple, fasting and praying, hoping that your piety would convince the gods to lift their painful curse. It's like getting a really bad flu, and your doctor tells you it's because you didn't recycle enough. Slightly more pressure than just taking some vitamin C. A fascinating, lesser-known detail involves the concept of divine touch for healing. While pain was often seen as punishment, it could also be alleviated by direct divine intervention. In ancient Egypt, certain gods, like Sekhmet, were associated with both disease and healing. Priests serving these deities might perform rituals involving the laying on of hands, or the patient might sleep in a temple, hoping for a dream where the god would touch them and remove their pain. This wasn't about a chemical sedative. It was about a direct transfer of divine energy, a miraculous intervention that bypassed the need for earthly remedies. The academic debate here often centers on the psychological power of belief and the placebo effect. Did the patient genuinely experience a reduction in pain due to divine intervention? Or was it the profound conviction in such intervention that triggered the body's own healing mechanisms?